Today, colleagues of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny accuse Russian authorities of trying to cover up his death as hundreds are arrested. Ukraine's president blames an artificial deficit of weapons for the fall of a key city in the war against Russia.
We can get our land back, and Putin can lose.
Thailand's former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra released from prison 6 months after returning from exile. And Cootamundra transformed to host the annual Coota Beach Volleyball event. Hello, welcome to ABC News. I'm Lorna Dunkley. The death of Alexei Navalny, one of President Putin's most prominent critics, has been confirmed by his family. They say they've had no access to his body and they believe it's being deliberately withheld so that the authorities can cover their tracks. Meanwhile, more than 350 people have been detained for attending memorials for the opposition leader in Russia.
In Moscow, they continue to bring flowers and pay respects to Alexei Navalny, the Kremlin's most vocal critic who has died in prison. Move along, you can't stay here, the policeman says. We have the right to be here, she shouts. We want to, and we will stand here. Someone adds, this street isn't yours, it belongs to everyone. But the riot police don't seem to think so. There are cries of disgrace, shame, as police start to clear the area. And then the arrests. Across Russia, hundreds of people have been detained at events commemorating the late opposition leader. These are the last known images of Alexei Navalny from 2 days ago. The Russian authorities claim he died the next day after falling unconscious. Today, Mr. Navalny's mother arrived at the remote penal colony where he died, beyond the Arctic Circle. She was told her son's body had been taken to a local morgue. But
the body of Alexei isn't there. So Alexei's prison just lied to his lawyer and his mother that the body is there. And so we don't have any clue where he is now and what is happening to him and when it will be given to the family.
We do know one thing. The Russian authorities are saying very little about what happened. The death of Alexei Navalny is a huge story outside Russia. But here, it's being kept out of the headlines. It's barely mentioned by the state media, as if the Kremlin is hoping, out of sight, out of mind. Not everyone is out laying flowers, but everyone we spoke to had heard about Mr. Navalny's death, though there was a mixed reaction. It's very sad, Anton says, and it's bad that there are political prisoners. But Yelena tells me she's not interested. She doesn't care about politics. Such indifference suits the authorities. To his supporters, Alexei Navalny will always be a symbol that change is possible. But the Kremlin will be hoping that most Russians won't care enough to make him a martyr.
Ukraine's president has made an urgent appeal for more weapons as Russian troops take control of the strategic town of Avdiivka. Volodymyr Zelensky blamed the withdrawal on a shortage of long-range weapons, which he says has allowed Russian forces to gain a foothold in the region. Almost all of the town's pre-war population of more than 30,000 people have now left, with the city itself almost completely destroyed.
Our actions are limited only by the sufficiency and length of the range of our strengths. But what does not depend on us? And Avdiivka situation proves this exactly.
There's been a surge in Israel killing and detaining Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, many of whom they've abused and harassed. The United States, the United Kingdom and others have sanctioned a handful of extremist settlers in a rare rebuke. But as Global Affairs editor John Lyons and Middle East correspondent Tom Joyner report, such measures won't change the chokehold Israel has over ordinary Palestinians.
Could you tell me when were these entrances to the village blocked off?
حطوهن لهم 40 يوم. بس شو يا ابني بس عشان نشتر الطريق والله عشان نشتروها. شوف قديش قرية اتاذت من هاي الطريق وتعبت. صار عمري 75 سنة بس عمري ما شفت هاللي صار. عمري ما شفت اللي صار السنة. ما عمرنا شفنا يعني مثله.
This is the West Bank, or the occupied Palestinian territories. This area clearly illustrates the reality of occupation. On that hill is an Israeli settlement, Migdalim, and on that hill is a Palestinian village, Kusra. They're worlds apart. The Hassan family hasn't heard from their 18-year-old son, Mohammed, since he was taken by the Israeli army in late November.
احنا طبعا كنا نايمين بالليل يعني كنا نايمين يعني فاقتحموا البيت علينا يعني بشكل همجي اقتحموا البيت عندي انا اولاد صغار زي ما انت شايف يعني تصرعوا وصاروا يبكوا وصاروا يعيطوا يعني هو في سجل مجده هو لسه مش محكوم.
The family says their son's charges include throwing rocks at soldiers. The Israeli army would not comment on his case. He's one of more than 7,000 Palestinians arrested across the West Bank since October 7. Palestinian prisoners' rights groups say Israeli forces have beaten and harassed many of them and destroyed their homes and property. Could you tell us about the difference in the lives of the people up there in the settlement and the lives of the people here in the village?
الفرق قدامك احنا هم عايشين في ارضنا هاي الارض إننا مش لهم واحنا اطلع علينا لا عندنا قادرين نطلع من بلدنا يعني احنا اصبحنا نعيش يأسانين من الحياة هاي.
Israeli settlers who live illegally in the West Bank according to international law have carried out hundreds of attacks on Palestinians since October 7. Israel's closest ally, the United States, has introduced sanctions against certain extremist settlers in the West Bank. Kusra's mayor drove us to where there'd been several recent attacks. No sooner than we get there, two Israeli settlers arrive. Armed with an M16, they block our path.
طبعا ولا كل عيشتنا خوف اذا بديش اخاف على حالي بدي اخاف على اولادي واولاد الناس اللي انا مسؤول عنهم يعني الناس قاعده انا كل يوم انا بيجيني ناس ابني اخذوه ليش اخذوه كاين ابنه هنا يلعب في عند الدور هذول بيجوا باخذوه.
Is that settlement as well? That's an Israeli settlement.
شوفوا هذول مسلحين والجنود هسه بيجوك هسه انت يقعد 5 دقائق وانا جنود بيجوك ما في فرق بين مستوطن وجندي بالنهايه هذا بيكمل الدور هذا يلا تفضل.
And within minutes Israeli soldiers appear.
Hello, from Australia. Australia. Sorry?
Sorry, are we doing something wrong here? So we were just doing an interview here with the mayor, and these two Israeli soldiers came up, wanted my passport, press pass, demanded to know who we were, and I said we were just doing an interview on Palestinian land, and they wouldn't say anything in response to that.
بعد 7 أكتوبر استغلوا اللي هي ما حصل 7 أكتوبر والحرب اللي صارت زادت الاعتداءات بشكل ملحوظ وبشكل واضح ومن ثم صرنا نعيش يعني احنا يعني مش قادرين نصل أرضنا مش قادرين نحرث أرضنا مش قادرين نشتغل مش قادرين نعيش.
Well, Israel justifies the crackdown as part of its campaign against Hamas. Ordinary Palestinians are suffering. John Lyons, ABC News, Kusra.
The total number of foreign nationals who have arrived in WA's remote north remains unknown after multiple groups of men claiming to have travelled from Indonesia by boat were found. The ABC understands a third group was discovered on Friday afternoon in the Kimberley region, taking the total number of arrivals to more than 35. It is believed the first group, who say they're from Pakistan and Bangladesh, left the community in a bus on Saturday. The New South Wales Environment Protection Authority expects to receive more test results today from schools suspected of asbestos contamination. So far, garden mulch at 2 schools has tested positive for asbestos, alongside dozens of parks, a hospital, a supermarket and a residential estate under construction. But the regulator says it's confident that asbestos testing at Sydney Olympic Park won't affect next week's Taylor Swift concerts there. The EPA is testing mulch from a median strip at the park after it was identified as a priority area. A Chinese temple has gone up in flames in South Melbourne overnight. Firefighters were called to Cobden Street at around 9 o'clock after they found smoke coming from the second floor and roof of the building. Fire Rescue Victoria says once inside, crews found a significant fire spreading to the first floor of the temple. No one was injured. Police say an arson chemist will attend the scene today to determine the cause of the blaze. Doctors are pushing for a $16 increase in the Medicare rebate for longer consultations that deal with complex and chronic conditions. The Royal Australian College of General Practitioners is pushing for the changes in the May federal budget. The current rebate for consultations that last longer than 20 minutes is around $80. Doctors want it lifted to $96. President Nicole Higgins says the rebate needs to be updated to meet patient needs. Let's take you now to the New South Wales Environmental Protection Agency, giving an update on asbestos contamination.
Update on this asbestos issue. First point I'd like to make is we've received very pleasing news overnight that Sydney Olympic Park, which is a site we had concerns may have received contaminated product, has now been cleared by significant battery of tests. All of our tests at Olympic Park are negative, and I can say with certainty that the Harbour City is ready to welcome Taylor Swift with open arms, and the hundreds of thousands of Swifties who we expect to enjoy her sellout performances. As of last night, the total number of tests that have returned negative results as part of this work is 662. We do have a further update involving schools. 2 schools have now confirmed positive results, and my colleague Murat will take you through the detail there. 2 schools have now returned negative results, which is obviously pleasing. And there is ongoing testing at a further 4 schools. The community may have seen yesterday, and they'll see more today, fire and rescue crews as well as EPA officers out conducting further tests. Understand we conducted about 60 of those yesterday, samples and tests, and there'll be a similar number today, so we'll have a more significant data set as we work to the bottom of this part of the supply chain that we've had particular concerns about in the coming days. I also should just share Sutherland Hospital has an area of a garden bed that has now been fenced off, made safe, and is in the process of being tested. And I have an update just very recently from the University of Sydney, where we had a concern they may have received contaminated product. They understand most, if not all, of that product is still packaged. And obviously therefore does not present a risk. They're just working through that detail, but they expect to operate safely as per their normal processes tomorrow as well. Separately, the National Park Service has taken a precautionary step at one garden bed in the Royal National Park to fence that off while they do some work there. And I'll just make a brief further comment, which I think is important, to clarify that the EPA is still investigating all lines of inquiry in this matter. We've consistently said we haven't ruled any particular ultimate causation in or out. There is one company that has been the focus of media commentary. The only comment the EPA has made involving that business is when we published a prevention notice preventing them from on-selling their product, which they have complied with, and is on the public record, and it's required under our legislation to be on the public record. It's certainly unhelpful at this point for anyone to attribute blame. As we've consistently said, this is a complex supply chain and the investigation is ongoing. When it concludes, we will release a full report to the public as well as any potential court processes that follow. I'm happy to take questions, but before that, I'll just hand to my colleague, the Secretary of Education, just to comment on the schools.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Murat Dizdar, Secretary of the New South Wales Department of Education. Can I first of all again thank Tony Chappell and his team in the Environmental Protection Authority. They've been working very closely with us, and to date we've been working with 12 schools across the state, across the sectors, government, Catholic and also independent. And I want to provide that context because there's something like 3,000 schools in this state, but it's been 12 that we've been working with. And it's quite pleasing that 4 of those sites, 4 of those schools have now been cleared of any asbestos, and overnight another 2 were part of that 4. Let me just name them. They were International Grammar School at Ultimo and Westmead Christian Grammar School at Westmead. So all 4 of those school communities are undertaking teaching and learning on site, continuing tomorrow, and the communication has happened with those school communities. There are 4 sites that we're still waiting for further test results from, and they are Don Ramey College at Five Dock, Edmondson Park Public School in Edmondson Park, Mount Annan Christian College at Currans Hill, and Trinity Catholic Primary at Kemps Creek. We're hopeful of attaining those results today so we can communicate to those school communities prior to the kick-off of the school week tomorrow. There has been 4 sites that have now been confirmed as having positive asbestos material, and there were 2 sites overnight where we communicated to the school communities around those results. They were Penrith Christian School at Orchard Hills and St Luke's Catholic College at Marsden Park. Can I just say, as someone who's been in education across 27 years, I want to thank our school communities. They've really trusted us with the expert advice we've provided from the EPA and also with New South Wales Health. In the vast majority of these cases, we've been able to continue on-site teaching and learning. It's those cases that have had the positive site that we're working on a case-by-case basis. I mean, Liverpool West has been in the media. I'm looking forward to that school continuing on-site learning at Gulyangarra Public School tomorrow. In fact, I'm going to drop in myself to see how proceedings are. I know that the team there in the Department of Education has done all they can to support them. In other cases, like Allambie Heights, where there's been a positive case, the affected area has been able to be cordoned off, made safe, and the school can continue on-site teaching and learning. I think it's really important to know that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. 12 out of 3,000 schools across the state, and we'll continue to keep them updated.
So we constantly hear the term an abundance of caution. St Luke's Catholic College in Marsden Park is closing for a week based on a small pile of isolated nitrogen that's been secured and not accessible by students. Is this not getting a bit ridiculous?
I think, it goes back to the point about adopting a case-by-case approach. My understanding of that school is that there was something like 30 cubic metres of mulch that was provided, because there's quite an extensive amount. It's quite widespread throughout the school, and that was difficult to cordon off and contain. So that school and that sector has taken a very precautionary approach, just like we did at Liverpool West.
It has been cordoned off, it has been contained, it's bonded asbestos, and students don't have access to it. Why should a school elect to close down for an entire week?
New South Wales Health indicates that bonded asbestos is of low risk. It has been cordoned off and closed, but that work needs to be remediated, just like we've been doing at Liverpool West. I understand that school and that sector wanted to err on the side of caution and revert to learning from home. It's not ideal, not ideal. It won't be the case everywhere. In fact, it's only happened at one other site at Liverpool West Public School. But I respect that school and that sector's decision, and I know that parents will also support it. I know it's also a massive inconvenience to parents, but I know parents wouldn't want us to jeopardise the safety of their children or our staff, and the vast majority of cases that won't be needed. That one's operating. We've been able to, secure the site, make sure that the affected area is well out of touch with students and staff, and we weren't able to achieve that at St Luke's, is my understanding, but at Penrith Christian we were able to achieve that.
And on Liverpool West, are things still tracking according to a timeline?
Yeah, I'm really pleased with our people. All stops have been pulled out at Liverpool West. I had a report there this morning that we're almost 90% of the mulch safely removed with EPA guidelines from the site. So we're well on track. We indicated that it was a further 2 weeks to not only remove it, but then to replace it with the material that should have been there in the first place. We are kicking off our education on-site at Gulliangari. It's only 10 minutes from the school. We've arranged transport, laptops, parent communication. The entire school will operate from there so that we don't puncture the learning opportunity for those students. We did give a 2-week marker there. I'm hopeful from reports this morning we may be even able to accelerate that if possible.
Is there any idea how much remediation of this
Well, with the government sector, the remediation is not something that is left to the school or the school community to pick up the cost. It's not like a cost that's passed on to parents. The Department of Education provides that systemic support, and I've offered that support as Secretary of Education to my Catholic and independent colleagues where it may be needed. So far, that's a cost that's going to be incurred by us in the system. We don't want that passed on to our schools.
What's your message to parents at all schools where it's been rejected? The parents have anything to worry about if their kids were exposed to it's not true?
Yeah, I really want to thank our parents and guardians. They've really worked with us as we've communicated along the way. In many of those school communities, we've had that communication translated into multiple languages to recognise and respect that community composition. I've read those communication pieces. They're very, very clear that the New South Wales health advice, the expert advice on bonded asbestos, is that there's very minimal risk. That communication says we're taking an abundance of caution, cordoning off the affected areas, remediating when the school is not operating, outside of school hours, so no one's impacted. Let me assure, these aren't inside classrooms. We're talking garden beds and play areas in schools. We've been able to cordon off. I want to thank our community for working with us. And as we fix that work and remediate and come in the clear, we'll also communicate that back to those school communities.
We reached the climax of this. Do you expect more schools to be identified?
Look, one school being impacted is one too many, but there's 12 so far that we've worked with across 3,000 schools, government, non-government, Catholic schools in this state. From my angle as Secretary of Education, it has been quite contained. You know, I remember the COVID experience and how widespread that was. I'm hopeful that we keep working our way through and communicating and supporting those sites that may be impacted, and also then reinforcing our requirements on these sites, because our requirements are that there shouldn't be recycled mulch, and there should not be certainly mulch that has any remnants of any asbestos. That's illegal as far as I understand, and what's occurred here is a great shame, because then it impacts on young people, our staff, our school communities.
In other work at Liverpool West at the moment, is it contained some mulch remediation? Because I understand there were some asbestos issues at the school dating back that time.
That school has had a major capital upgrade in 2 stages. It's a fantastic school that's given decades of service, and it's a wonderful facility. And it's a great shame that we kicked off the school year in those new facilities and then had to decant. My understanding is that the asbestos is just limited. It was 1 sample that came back positive out of multiple samples in the mulch, where, like I said, as I speak to you, 90% of that mulch has been safely removed with EPA guidelines, and we'll be replacing it with the material that should have been there in the first place.
Using this opportunity, are you to do other works to the school related to asbestos?
I don't believe any of that is required. All other works have been as per required specifications, is the briefing I've had.
How do you expect working parents to react, and employers who won't have access to their employees based on St Luke's shutting down for a week? risk to students?
Look, I know it's not ideal. You know, St Luke's, and then I indicated at Liverpool West, there's situations that are far from ideal. There's 200 education days in a year. Every day counts for us. We want our students. We want our students inside the school gates, but there will be circumstances where we need to be abundantly cautious because that mulch may be wider spread. You know, at Allambie Heights, 2 trees, a garden bed, quite easy to cordon off, quite easy to keep the school away from. That wasn't the case at Liverpool West. And it's not my understanding that that's the case at St Luke's.
It says the mulch has been secured.
I'm going to back in the school and sector's decision and respect the stance they've taken. It's one that they would not take lightly.
As you previously said, recycled mulch shouldn't be used on schools, but now we're seeing it popping up across multiple schools. How has it been allowed?
Yeah, in public education that I'm responsible for, we've written to all our major builders and subcontractors, reminding them of our standards around mulch. With Liverpool West, you know, we'll have to work through that particular builder. We've also issued a safety alert to the 2,200 government schools around mulch that they may purchase. If you want me to break out the song, we're in trouble. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you continue the press in D minor? That'd be great.
Sorry.
Just a quick one.
Yeah.
How many kids at St Luke's?
It's a K-12 school. I think it's, my brief says it's close to 2,000 students. Yeah.
2,000?
It's a K-12 school, so, you know, combined primary and high school all the way through.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
In terms of, I know you said that you're still looking at all avenues.
Yes.
In terms of legacy asbestos,
Yes.
is that still an avenue?
Look, all avenues remain open, and I really can't comment on the specifics of this investigation. It's a broad, complex investigation and the largest in the EPA's history. As I've also said previously, asbestos is a prolific substance that's been used for over a century in Australia. It was only really prohibited 20 years ago, and the injuries we've seen from affected workers in the manufacture and mining of that are, of course, very serious. But in the bonded form, which is what this material is, which is bonded to cement or other kinds of plasterboard or other material, the New South Wales Health Advice is very clear that it presents a low risk. But despite that, it is unacceptable to have asbestos or any other contaminant in a product that is sold either as mulch or in other sectors. So we are looking carefully across the supply chain. The Premier and our Minister have been very clear that all options are on the table to improve regulatory settings where that's required. That's going to be informed by an investigation, and I'm sure the government will have more to say about that in the weeks ahead.
Do you feel there is any risk, even 0.001% chance of risk to students in St Luke's in bonded asbestos that has been located and isolated that cannot be accessed by students?
Well, this is where we're going to leave our viewers on ABC television. You can keep watching this news conference over on the ABC News channel.